Hello and welcome back for another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for ranked play in patch 1010. Our analysts will be diving into why each champion is great in the current meta. As always, this list is not in order of strength as each champion is viable depending on the right situation. With that said, let's get into the video. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Okay folks, first up we have Twisted Fate coming in at the number 10 spot on the list. Twisted Fate is still going strong in 1010 as a great early champion that you can still hyper roll for. Candyland did get a nerf and has played less, but Twisted Fate remains a key champion for the build nonetheless. Outside of that, he's a great option early on through stage 2 and early stage 3 as an item carry. He's also been creeping up in the Void Brawler build where you hyper roll for him alongside Kha'Zix and Malphite. As mentioned, he is a fantastic item holder mainly for magic damage items or items made from a tier. Morellonomicon is still by far the best item for him with Seraphs and Shojin as the tier items you want to give him. Outside of those items, he's fairly flexible, especially if you plan to sell him later. Overall, as far as one-cost champions go, he's got quite a lot of versatility in the meta. Next up at number 9, we have Lucian. So Lucian is once again back on the list for the same old reason as before. He's good in the early game with Cybernetics and Blaster and carries items well, especially red buff. But despite how good he's been, his time in the sun may begin to dwindle as he's slowly been falling out of favor in the meta. That said, it's always worth considering playing him if you get a red buff, 2-star him early, and have 3 Cybernetics. Later on in the game, he's much less important and is often going to be sold, but still has a place if you're looking to run 6 Cybernetics. Moving on down the list, we have Graves as the number 8 champion on the list. Graves. The champion is still insanely useful at all stages of the game because a 4-second blind is always going to be strong. Especially given how many auto attack based carries there are, being able to blind them is absolutely huge. Whether it's early game or late game, he has a good chance of giving you value from his ability. On top of that, Blaster is still a useful trait to have in the meta, and Space Pirate's early game is still fantastic. An added bonus of playing Graves is his complete lack of dependency on items or needing to 3-star him to keep him relevant later in the game as a 1-cost champion. All you really need is him 2-starred and you're good to go when it comes to Graves. Up next, coming in at number 7 on the list, we have Shen. Shen is on the list this week because of how often he's played in various different builds. You don't really give him items, and let's be real, he's just there to cast his ultimate once and die, but the amount of time he buys in the front line is crazy high. Not only is he a stellar tank, he's also got 2 very useful and common traits, Chrono and Blade Master. With those 2 traits, he's easy to fit into many builds such as Shredder, Chrono Kale, and Cybernetics. He's a solid pickup at any stage of the game as well, which makes him easily one of the most versatile 2-cost champions in the game. The next champion should not surprise you as the number 6 champion on the list is Xayah. The Shredder Queen is still going strong in 1010. Xayah did lose 5 attack damage in patch 1010, but that hasn't slowed her down as she's still a viable carry in Shredder. Outside of that build, just having your 2-starred early game with a couple of items can help you win rounds through almost all of stage 3. The buff to Deathblade has also made items less specific for Xayah, as now you can play for Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, Runins, and Deathblade instead of the former 2 being the only playable damage items. All in all, Xayah is still a dominant hard carry and a flexible item holder throughout the game with 2 useful traits. Let's move on and talk about our number 5 champion, Jace. While this list is sort of Space Pirate heavy, it did feel necessary to include Jace as he's a fantastic mid-game frontline unit. With 2 Vanguard being buffed, it's easy to fit him in with another Vanguard, which is enough to make your frontline really strong. On top of that, he does good damage with his ultimate. And he's a Space Pirate, so he has a place early game if you find him quick enough to get you some extra gold. Lastly, when it comes to Jace, he also has a place in the Space Jam comp. He's not exactly the star of that build, Darius is, but he still is a key champion for it. Basically, whichever composition you're running, you can't go wrong by picking up Jace to bolster your front line. Alright, the next 2 champions don't quite fit the usual criteria for top champions list, but they are just so darn good in the meta that we're making room for them. First up is Miss Fortune coming in at number 4 on the list. The reason why Miss Fortune generally wouldn't be on the list normally is how dependent she is on being 2-starred with mercenary upgrades. But even without that, she still proves useful. It's just for her hard carry, she needs to be level 2 with at least 1 mercenary upgrade. She's easily one of the strongest late game carries and pairs well with very popular 4-cost champions like Kale. The downsides are it's hard to 2-star her and mercenary upgrades are very expensive. Also, without Quicksilver, she's likely to get interrupted when casting, but all all of those things aside, she's a worthwhile pickup late game for a lot of comps. And Gangplank is the second exception to the top 10 criteria. He's coming in at number 3 on the list. The reasons why are the same as Miss Fortune. He has expensive upgrades and is hard to 2-star. But even without upgrades and being level 1, as long as he has a Guardian Angel, he's generally going to get at least one ultimate off late game, and boom, most of the enemy team is stunned as long as you have that second Demolitionist. Throw in an upgrade, 2-star him, and maybe an extra item, and boom, most of the enemy team has taken a ton of damage and is stunned. Gangplank is easily one of the best, if not the best, late game champions to play in almost every single composition. Ideally, you want to have another Demolitionist with him, but as long as you have those mercenary upgrades and 2-star him, he's going to be super strong for your build. Basically, as far as late game AoE damage goes, Gangplank is the king, with Miss Fortune being the queen. Let's move on to our last 2 champions on the list, starting with the champion coming in at number 2, Jinx. Jinx is still doing well and is a very versatile 4-cost carry, though she has fallen off ever so slightly. Basically, she's amazing in the mid game and early late game, but does get outshined by the AoE of Miss Fortune and Gangplank. But that said, she's still highly contested and strong as hell when you get the 2-star. If you find her early and 2-star her, you can run her in multiple builds, even as just a one-off champion, even if you don't get to make use of her traits. An important reason as to why Jinx is so valuable as a carry is how flexible she is with items. You can end up playing Jinx later in the game even if you're slamming early items, as she can use many different damage-focused items or defensive items. Just to name a few, you can give her Giant Slayer, Red Buff, Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, Guardian Angel, or Trap Claw. The flexibility really helps open up the possibility of playing her in the mid to late game. Okay, so where Jinx has fallen off a bit, Kayle has continued her dominance as a 4-cost carry, and because of that, she is number 1 on today's list. In fact, it could be argued that Kayle is more popular in 1010 than she was previously, as you'll almost never go a game without seeing at least 2 people playing her. A big reason as to why, besides the obvious one of her doing good damage, is how darn versatile she is being played in so many compositions. There's the standard Chrono Kayle composition, which has many variations. Outside of that, you can often just throw her on your board if you have her 2-starred because of how strong she is in general. Whichever way you choose to use her, you also have plenty of options when it comes to items for her. In general, you'll want to have 1 attack speed item and 1 defensive item. Rageblade is one of the best items for her, with Rapid Fire Cannon, Morellonomicon, Death Cap, and Quicksilver all being viable items for her. Overall, it's impressive how versatile this champion is. Keep in mind though, she's going to be highly contested, so always scout. That's going to be it for our top 10 list, but of course we're not done yet, as we've got a few honorable mentions to go over. These are champions we want to put in the spotlight, as they're all viable options that may go unnoticed most of the time. First up is Karma. Karma got an insane buff in 1010 to the attack speed her ability provides, which should make her a perfect partner for most carries. But there actually hasn't been a ton of builds focusing on her in that role, even though she's in a state comparable to set 2, where she was paired with almost every carry. There has been an increase in how often players are utilizing her, but it definitely seems like she's being underutilized currently. Once players experiment with her more, expect to see the value of Karma rise quickly. Our next honorable mention is another champion that hasn't been given quite enough attention, Rakan. So Rakan is quietly played in a few compositions like Shredder and Space Jam, but he doesn't seem to get a lot of attention otherwise. The CC that he can provide is great, and he's a Celestial, which is almost always a useful trait to have. Protector is kind of meh and not that important in most games, but Celestial is splashed into so many builds. He may not be a staple late game unit, but early and mid game, he is more than capable of doing well, and we recommend trying him out. One last thing to touch on about Rakan is how Shojin really increases how effective he can be. Because of how mobile he can be on the board, making hits so he can cast more often is extremely useful. Morellonomicon is another useful item for him, so definitely try out one or both of those items on him. Our last honorable mention is Kassadin. It's not so much that Kassadin is underutilized or underrated, but he is certainly underappreciated for how useful he can be. Occasionally players will mention how great he is, but in general he feels like a silent carry. He has an AoE disarm with 2 amazing traits, one being Mana Reaver and Celestial as the other. All of these things combined make him incredibly flexible and impactful. Kassadin is playable in several builds, such as any variation of Kayle carry, Space Jam, and in general as a second Mana Reaver alongside Aurelia or Thresh. Keep an eye out for this champion, especially during the early stages of the game, as 2-starring him can be an effective way to increase your board strength. That's all we have for you today, folks. We hope this shines a light on why a few of these champions are so good in the current meta. Let us know in the comment section below which champions you've been playing and having the most success with in your ranked games. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.